Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Go Back Where You Came From. I live in a German-speaking country and we are known to be very strict about closing times and time limits at our government offices. I happened to witness some fine malicious compliance in one of these offices. I work as some sort of engineer and went to an office which is dealing with formal requests regarding government-issued assignments. If you want to get such an assignment, you have to bring in paperwork in person up to a specific date. Because of the form and many things that happen in my industry, it is quite common to bring in the paperwork on the last possible day. It was close to closing time and I was waiting for someone when a woman entered the room, obviously in a rush, heading to the counter where paperwork must be put in. The counter was empty at the time. While she rushes across the waiting area, her paperwork slides out of her arms and falls to the ground, spreading all over. As she is trying to put all together, a man, who looked Middle Eastern, tried to help her, but when he touched her she let out a shriek and told him to get back where he belongs and to not touch her paperwork. Obviously a racist remark, telling him to get to his country of origin, a quite common statement here. Without a word he gets up and behind the counter the woman was heading for. When she finally finished picking up her papers she heads to the counter, realizing that he is in there. Just as she reaches him he puts up a sign saying, "Closed," and points to the clock which had just reached closing time. Her face went blank as she stammered to please make an exception, but she surely knew from the beginning this was a pointless request. If she had let him help her, I'm sure she would have been able to put in the paperwork. I just can make an assumption that she either wasn't able to put in the paperwork at all or at least had to come in again the next day. Surely not what her boss was expecting. Next one is titled, Medical Billing Wants to Talk to Dad? Okay, long story short. Dad died of ignored cancer about a month after diagnosis. About a week after he died, the first medical bills started coming in. He was newly unemployed, we hadn't set up Cobra, and this was before the Medicaid expansion. He'd had ICU, airlift, ambulance services, multiple doctors, and a number of other interventions that racked up a pretty penny. So the collections people were politely, but firmly, asking for their money. We had to explain to each separate agency, each hospital, each doctor, each transport, and more, that he was deceased and that his estate was being finalized, and that the debts would be resolved if they just gave us time. One day the helicopter ambulance people called when we were especially sour. We had just gone over numbers and gotten bad news, and we had told them before to give us time. "Hello, is this Dad's name?" "No, this is his son. What can I do for you?" "This is Air Ambulance Company asking about some outstanding costs. May we speak to him please?" "Sure. Let me get a shovel." The caller paused, then it clicked, and with barely contained horror responded, "Take as long as you need. Our number is X. Thank you for your time." We did get a spend down in Cobra and it all got resolved with the estate, but for those first couple of months, I lost what little cool I had with the ghoulish infernal device that is the American for-profit healthcare system. Next one is titled, Supervisor Tells Me to Mind My Business, It's Going to Cost $10,000. This happened yesterday. I'm a carpenter working on a project to replace 185 deck deemed unsafe. Having been in construction for so many years I have a knack to pick up on screw-ups as they happen. Some supervisor don't like this because it makes them feel like I'm saying they're not doing their job. First thing in the morning I noticed we have 4 new carpenter. I ask boss man, do these guys know where to pull the measurements from? Supervisor tells me don't worry about what they're doing, just do safety rails. As I'm doing the safety rails I hear them go 119 to inside frame. They are supposed to take measurements from outside trim, reduce 1/2 inch due to new border trim that covers 1 inch. Where they took measurements from is a whole 4 inch shy. They built 3 decks short Friday and pre-cut 6 wrong for Tuesday. Supervisor hasn't realized they screwed up $10,000 worth of decking material. But the decks all have their safety rails. Next one is titled, Bank Fee Avoidance. This tale reminded me of what I'm currently doing with my bank. They have bill paying service where they will actually generate a paper check and mail it to payees if they don't support electronic funds transfer. I can pay most of my bills online myself, but my water utility doesn't have a way to pay online, so I used the bank's bill pay for this. One day, I noticed an odd $5.95 charge that was popping up at the start of each month. I called the bank to question it and they said that if I don't use the bill pay at least twice a month then the charge is applied. Since I only pay the water bill every other month, that's why I was getting charged. Since I needed to use it twice a month to avoid the charge, I figured out an easy way to satisfy the rules. The bill pay system allows you to set up regular payments to a payee, so I set myself up as a payee and scheduled a $1 payment to myself every 2 weeks. Now I see a periodic $1 deduction and a few days later I get a $1 check in the mail which I immediately deposit with their phone app. Net zero cost for me and $5.95 fee avoided. Next one is titled, "Take my front row seat and tell me to just sit behind you. If you insist." Bear with me since I'm not a great storyteller, but I thought this one needed to be here. During halftime at our local high school's football game, we went to the concession stand to get some food. Now, I didn't think it'd be an issue because we were sitting with a group of people, but I laid my stuff out on the bleachers anyway. However, when we got back we were met with a group of middle-aged people and a rather elderly lady sitting in our spot and my stuff tossed to the side. Now, usually I am an extremely nice person, to the point that people are always yelling at me for being too nice and getting taken advantage of. But this week I have had enough. I am sick of being taken advantage of and done dealing with people's bullcrap, well you know. I stood there for a minute and said, this is our seat, you took our seat and that's extremely rude. The leader of middle-aged ladies, who we'll call Karen, snapped back. They said no one was sitting here, so sorry. But made absolutely no attempt at moving, to which my husband said, yeah, you really look sorry. Karen motioned behind her and said, there's room back there. However, there was only one small section of bleacher directly behind her and between our entire group. I thought about it for a second and realized that arguing wasn't going to get us anywhere and would just make me look bad. So I smiled to my husband and said, okay, let's squeeze in here. It was like he could read my mind in that second and knew exactly what was about to happen. So my husband and I, along with our 4 children, squeezed right up behind and beside Karen. As anyone with kids or anyone that has ever seen kids, you can probably see where this went. These kids were running on pure sugar, adrenaline and school spirit after a long first week of school. And I made special sure the youngest, a 6-year-old boy, sat right next to me, directly behind Karen and her large bleacher chair she had set up. Did I also mention that the reason we were sitting up front is because kids can't sit still? These kids like getting as close as possible to see the game, but also enjoy coming back to us to sit and talk for a bit. In any other situation I would have made sure my kids were respectful and courteous of those around us. I would have put a stop to the screaming when our team scored, the jumping up and down chanting with the cheerleaders, running between us and the fence, but not this night. I think it took Karen all of 5 minutes to realize her mistake. The cringing from the screams right behind her, the leaning from side to side when they were standing at the fence blocking her view, the 6-year-old happily swinging his feet back and forth oblivious he was repeatedly kicking the back of her seat. Karen was getting audibly and visibly annoyed from it all and kept giving me dirty looks as if to say, control your children, where I'd just shrug and look at my husband and say, I tried to tell her. One by one those in Karen's group started to leave, but Karen held on the longest and still only made it about half an hour before she decided she couldn't take it anymore and left. Now I'm not a complete monster. I made sure my kids didn't bump or bother the elderly lady, and I even asked Karen to move her purse she had put behind her before it got stepped on, but even that was met with a scoff. Maybe next time though, Karen will think twice before stealing seats from kids because she might get more than she bargained for by inviting us to squeeze in behind her. Next one is titled, Don't Eat Out If You Can't Afford It. Okay, we won't. At the time, I had just moved from a small village in Europe. When I had moved to Canada, I met up with others from my tiny area in Europe. Being from the same little country, we all became close. I had become friendly with a next-door neighbor, who was a waitress at a mid to high-level restaurant in this town. She told me I should stop by. And so I did. I brought my friends along, and it became a thing, where 9 to 12 of us would come in and eat and be served by her. At least once a week, every single week, often 2 times a week. I asked if that was okay, but she never seemed overwhelmed and we often caught her just chilling at the front desk once she was done with the initial plates. More on that later. Again, we are not from a tipping country, so I initially was going to tip 15%. Then I was graciously informed by the host that an auto 18% tip was added to the bill for groups larger than 6. Okay, great. Didn't have to figure out how much to tip. After almost 3 months or so of this, she stops by as I am taking out my trash. One thing to know about her is that she seems nice, but also has no tact. And can have a bossy demeanor. She tells us she enjoys having us as customers and loves seeing us enjoy the food, but that we should be tipping 20%, minimum. Heavy emphasis on the minimum. Also, good tippers would give at least 30%. I am a bit stunned that of all the things she'd talk about, it was that. So I simply say, I am sorry, okay. She finishes off with her signature sweet smile and the words, sorry hun. If you can't afford to eat out, then you shouldn't be doing so. Now, if she was polite and said something like, by the way, it's customary to tip XX if we do a good job. I understand you might not know the customs here, then I would have understood. But many times I remembered she was inattentive as a waitress. We'd often have to flag her down after making eye contact where she'd just wait behind the counter. Like I said, 20% was not out of the question. It was the way she said it. So I mentioned this encounter to my friends and after a little talk we realize we can't afford that. Nah, not if we also want to be able to purchase other goods such as fine wines, cheeses we love and the like. See, we aren't poor, but not rich either. These weekly dinners were little luxuries that we splurged for the sake of friends and feeling special in a fancy restaurant. It didn't break our bank, but it was still a significant amount of money. To tip her properly, and the fact that we all realized were other little things in life we'd rather spend our precious money on, we decided it was too much. Across all of us, it was hundreds in dollars in tips alone per week. That's a lot for us. We could use that money to rent a pool hall, fishing tours, which are very expensive, etc. So we did what any responsible adult did. We stopped buying what we couldn't afford. It was far cheaper to host our gatherings in someone's house and do a potluck, or make a deli board, etc. Now discussing this with other neighbors, I hear that she has said something to that sort to other people in the neighborhood. Invite out to eat, then tell them off later if the tip is too low. They have always said same thing, 20% minimum. Service wasn't the best, very hurried, not very attentive, etc. in the entitlement. Anyways, we stopped eating at the restaurant and having her as the waitress. Mind you, I never stopped saying hi to her. Kept up my pleasantries. But now, after we all of a sudden stopped coming in, she had a scowl on her face when she'd see me. Kept her responses quick and stopped saying hi as much. And then, about a month after we stopped, one of the other neighbors mentioned to me how she was complaining that her tips weren't great anymore and that she couldn't afford her to get more fillers for her cheeks at the new medical spa down the road. Oh well, like you said, don't eat out if you can't afford it. Last one is titled, Can't Use My Laptop Here. Okay, there's a nearby cafe that I frequent. While I do sometimes bring my laptop, I don't stay longer than an hour per visit. This morning, it was exceptionally busy. I had a task that was tiny, but kind of urgent, so the original plan was to work on it while finishing my coffee and be done and out within 20 minutes. It could be done on mobile, but that would take twice the time. You probably guessed where this was going. I whipped out my laptop, opened the task, the coffee was still steaming hot. 10% into the progress, so maybe 3 minutes later, and a waitress approached me to request that I don't use my laptop, because other customers could use a seat. I explained that I wouldn't stay longer than 30 minutes, but she was adamant. So, I obliged. She watched me turn off my laptop and put it away. I worked on mobile instead, like many other customers who have their eyes glued to their phones, and finished the task about 40 minutes later. Thanks for listening.